So I'm Gareth, this is What Culture Horror, and here are 10 awesome recent horror movies you will never watch again. Number 10, Heretic. A24 has spent the last decade and a half positioning itself as the go-to brand for indie horror, putting its weight behind unusual productions and up-and-coming talent. This trust-based relationship with audiences means that even when they produce and promote a film by Scott Beck and Brian Woods, directors of found-footage flop Nightlight, you still pay attention. The film in question is last year's Heretic, in which Hugh Grant, of all people, stars as sinister nihilistic scholar Mr. Reed, who traps two young Mormons, sisters Barnes and Paxton, in his labyrinthine home. To escape with their lives, all the girls have to do is pass his trials, which purport to show them the path to the one true religion, and break their faith in the process. The film is a thrilling ride, with the first half that's as tense as a suspension bridge, constantly shifting and repositioning our understanding of reality, Mr. Reed's motives, and the nature of belief. However, once the conclusion strikes, the game just is not half as fun. Now, Heretic is definitely great for one watch, but it's not a candidate for repeat viewing from the enlightened viewer. Number 9, The Coffee Table. Calle Casas' low-budget Spanish-language horror The Coffee Table is rather unique, in that its horrors are rooted in everyday life. The movie opens in a showroom, with a salesman making his best pitch to sell new parents Jesus and Maria a pretty hideous and supposedly unbreakable coffee table. And while the table is set up as a cursed object, you might expect demons and spirits to be unleashed on the unassuming family. This could not be farther from the truth, my friend. The table is missing a screw, and after failing to assemble it properly, Jesus is left to look after the baby and wait for the salesman to drop off the spare part. Maria has been gone 5 minutes when Jesus trips on the half-assembled table, the glass shatters, and the baby is decapitated. Jesus. Not since Thomas Vinterberg's The Hunt has it been so difficult to watch ordinary people going about their lives. Number 7, Knock at the Cabin. M. Night Shyamalan is a Marmite director if there ever was one. This reputation owing to his propensity for grand narrative twists that make or break a film. Recently, he's attempted to shake this reputation, relying less on bombshells that reshape the entire movie, and instead laying down small, manageable twists, or dispensing with them altogether. Knock at the Cabin falls into the latter category. Although the director did everything he could to make us think it wouldn't, the film drops in on Eric and Andrew, who take their adoptive daughter Wen away to a remote cabin for a few days of R&R. Unfortunately for them, 4 strangers arrive and hold them hostage, insisting that if the small family don't sacrifice one of their own, they will usher in the apocalypse. Some holiday. The central tension lies not in the actions of the hostage takers, who dispatch themselves with makeshift weapons in grim fashion, but in whether any of this is legit. However, once you know the truth, the film is spent. But despite subverting expectations, Shyamalan's anti-twist produced a similar result to his most denigrated movies, insomuch as nobody wants or needs to see it again. Number 6, Totally Killer. Amazon MGM's time-traveling slasher takes Gen Z Jamie Hughes back to 1987 to save her mother and her mother's school friends from being killed by the masked Sweet 16 killer. The film parodies and pays homage to the trappings of 80s horror along the way. Unlike the slashers of the 80s, however, this one doesn't really have a lot of rewatch value. It is absolutely thrilling on the first go-round, but the killer reveal and expositional ending don't leave enough to the imagination. As with many slashers post-Scream, there are 2 villains. By the end of the film, both are unmasked and either dead or on a totally different path. You know, wibbly-wobbly timelines and all that. Satisfying conclusion? Yeah, sure. But there is no reason to return to the film for another look, sadly. Yeah, it's a one and done this. Number 5, Pearl. Pearl, the second film in Ty West's X trilogy, is in fact a prequel to the first film. Written by West and star Mia Goth, who plays the eponymous killer during 2 weeks in COVID-19 quarantine, and shot on a low budget using the same sets and locations as X. The film shows Pearl, the antagonist from X, as a young woman who has dreams of stardom that she hopes will take her away from her dull country life and strict mother. Facing successive rejections and succumbing to her strange and sinister habits, killing animals, abusing her paralyzed paralyzed father, you know the stuff. Pearl loses touch with reality and takes axes, pitchforks, and pots of boiling water to her friends and family. It is indeed awesome to see her carving people up and succumbing to madness. But by the end of the film, you are caught up to the character from the first film, and all mystique is, well, gone. Thus, while Pearl is an amusing diversion, it feels thoroughly inessential to the so-called trilogy, offering nothing important to what the films are really about. Mia Goth's other character, Maxine Minx. You're forced to ask if you really needed to see Pearl's origins, and whether you will be watching this one ever again. Number 4, Enys Men. Mark Jenkins turned the film world upside down with 2019's Bait, his socio-drama shot in black and white on a 16mm clockwork camera. And when he announced that his next film would be a folk horror set off the coast of Cornwall, none of us could wait to see how he would realize it. Enys Men features Mary Woodvine as an unnamed volunteer living alone on a remote island, tracking the progression of a rare flower and the atmospheric conditions around it. As the isolation takes hold, she begins experiencing figures and images of the past, several periods of the previously inhabited island encroaching in on her present, while a monolithic rock monument creeps ever closer. Once again, Jenkins uses old technology, a hand-crank Bolex camera shot on stock that perfectly evokes the 70s film it calls back to. And it's not just visually arresting, but creepy as hell, in constant conversation with British folk horror. However, Enys Men is not an easy watch. It is cognitively challenging, infuriatingly abstract, and does not give over to easy interpretation. The experience is awesome in the literal sense of the word, but you may be forgiven for casting the film asunder when you're done, swearing never to set eyes on it again. Number 3, Resurrection. The film follows Margaret, whose organized and meticulously constructed life begins to crack when her abusive and hypnotically manipulative ex, David, finds her after 2 decades spent in relative anonymity. Challenging and emotionally fraught throughout, Resurrection's horror resides in David's abuses rather than more traditional trappings of serial killers, spirits, and monsters. And that the subject matter is so realistic makes it a seriously difficult watch. This feeling is compounded when the film takes a sharp turn into body horror in its third act, with grim scenes including cutting open and rooting around in someone's stomach for an unborn baby, leading on to a bittersweet conclusion that leaves quite a bad taste in the mouth. It's memorable, it's striking, but it's also hard not to gasp with relief when it's finally over. Every film thereafter feeling like a lungful of cold air on a warm day, to be honest. Number 2, Blink Twice. Blink Twice takes cocktail waitresses Frida and Jess to billionaire tech mogul Slater King's private island for a drug-fueled getaway in paradise. Once there, however, the women lose track of time, suffer strange dreams, and cannot account for mysterious injuries appearing on their bodies. The film turns about 2/3 in when the truth of what has been going on is revealed in graphic fashion, and the mystery becomes harrowing and all too real, touching on the kind of abuse that women face all over the world from powerful men. With this, the enjoyment of trying to unpick the film's mystery and piece together the strange happenings is gone, replaced by the grim dread of knowing what all of this means. Yeah, it would be somewhat tough to watch Blink Twice a second time. It would not be worth the additional trauma, really. And finally, we have number 1, Speak No Evil. Most in the film community have strong opinions about American-funded English-language remakes of foreign films designed to cater to Western audiences for whom subtitles are just a bridge too far. The majority of these remakes are far inferior versions of the original. But despite expectations, James Watkins' remake of Danish-Dutch film Speak No Evil managed to actually buck the trend. The film follows Louise, Ben, and Agnes Dalton, a small American family who find themselves staying on a remote farm in the West Country with Paddy, Kira, and their disabled son, Ant. A series of social faux pas carry the Daltons into an uncomfortable position, getting sucked deeper into the strange lives of Paddy and his tribe, until it looks like there is no escape. Speak No Evil revolves around James McAvoy's brutal, manic, and terrifying performance, which keeps us guessing whether he is just boisterous and brash or actually, unhinged. It's consistently intense and emotionally, almost physically taxing to watch, affixing our attention to the screen and forcing us to hold our breaths for long periods at a time. To reach the film's conclusion is an exhausting feat, and one whose repeat viewing doesn't really bear thinking about. So yeah, better to do this once and then never again.